Let me paint you a picture. There is a person, let's call them responsible. They work hard, they spend carefully, they don't waste money on things they don't need. Every month, without fail, they put a portion of their salary into savings accounts. They watch the number grow, they feel good about it, and they feel secure. And on paper, they are doing everything right, everything the conventional wisdom says to do. Save consistently, be patient, and let it accumulate. But here is what nobody told them, and what I think is one of the most important financial truths that almost never gets discussed in plain language. That number growing in their savings account, in real terms, in actual purchasing power, it might be shrinking every single month while they sleep, while they feel responsible and secure and on track. The savings account is not a place to store value in the current monetary environment, and for a lot of people, it sells slow leak. So, today's question is saving money actually enough, or have we been sold a version of financial responsibility that quietly works against us? I want to start by giving saving money its credit because I'm not here to tell you saving is bad. Saving is good and saving is necessary. We talked about this in a previous episode that emergency fund 3 or 6 months of expenses liquid, accessible. That's real and that matters. But there is a difference between saving as a foundation and saving as a strategy. And I think a huge number of people confuse the two. They treat the savings account as the destination, the place where financial responsibility lives, when really it's just the starting line. Here is why this matters so much right now, specifically. For most of the 20th century, inflation was low and relatively stable. So, keeping money in a savings account meant you lost a little purchasing power each year, maybe 1 or 2%. But it wasn't that catastrophic. The erosion was slow enough that most people never noticed anything. That era is over, or at least it's deeply uncertain. The money printing of the last decade, and specifically the extraordinary expansion of money supply between 2020 and 2023, fundamentally changed the landscape. Inflation hit levels in Europe and the US that most people alive today had never experienced. And even the headline numbers came down, the purchasing power that was lost during that period did not return. Prices don't go backwards. The damage is still here. So the question is not, should I save? The question is, what is saving actually doing to my financial position over time? And for a lot of people, the honest answer to that question is not that comfortable. So let's get it concrete because abstract financial concepts are easy to nod along to and then forget. I want you to feel this one. Imagine you have 10,000 euros in a savings account. Your bank is generous. Let's say they offer you 2% annual interest. So after 1 year, you have 10,200 euros. So you made 200 euros. That feels fine. But now let's say inflation that year ran at 5%, which is not a hypothetical, that was reality across most of Europe for a significant stretch of recent years. What that means is that the basket of goods and services that cost 10,000 euros at the start of the year now costs 10,500 euros. Your account has 10,200. You are 300 euros behind in real terms. You earned 200 nominally and lost 300 in purchasing power. So the net result is minus 100 euros of real wealth while doing everything right. Now, multiply that across 5 years or 10 years across your entire savings, not just 10,000. Across a period where inflation consistently outpaces your savings rate, which has been the reality for most people in most developed economies in the last 15 years. The number in your account grows, your actual financial position erodes, and the gap between the two things is what I call the inflation trap, the illusion of progress disguising a slow and silent loss. Now let's get one layer deeper, because the inflation you see reported in the news may not even be the inflation that's actually affecting your life. Official inflation figures, the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, are calculated using a basket of goods and services that is chosen and weighted by government and central banks. And I'm not going to go deep into the politics of that today, but I will say this: the things that matter most to your financial life, as of housing, education, healthcare, or the quality of food, have in many cases inflated significantly faster than the official headline number suggests. So, if you try to rent or buy a flat in a major European city in the last 5 years, you know this in your body. The numbers told you inflation was 3%, but your rent told you something very, very different. So the gap between what your savings earn and what your life actually costs might be even wider than the simple calculation suggests. You are not just losing to the reported inflation rate, you are potentially losing the real lived inflation of the specific things your life is built around. And here is the second layer of this trap, and this one is more psychological, because the savings account gives you the feeling of progress. So the number goes up, you feel responsible, you feel like you are moving forward. That feeling is real, but feelings and reality are not the same thing. And in personal finance, confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make over a long period of time. Savings account is comfortable, it's familiar, it requires nothing of you beyond depositing money and leaving it alone. And comfort, as we have talked about in other episodes, is not the same as safety. Sometimes they are opposites. So, if saving alone isn't enough, what's the deal? Let's talk about what actually protects your wealth over time. And I want to frame this clearly, because the answer is not Stop saving and do something risky. The answer is about understanding what different assets actually do and choosing intentionally rather than by default. There are broadly three categories of where you can put money: things that lose value over time in real terms, for example, cash and low yield savings account, for the reasons we have just discussed; things that track or loosely keep pace with inflation, for example, broad markets, index funds, real estate, commodities; and things that are structurally designed to appreciate against an expanding money supply, for example, scarce assets like gold and Bitcoin. Now, every one of those has trade offs. Index funds are liquid and diversified, but their returns are denominated in fiat currency. So your real gain depends heavily on what that currency does. Real estate builds real equity, but it's illiquid, concentrated, um, and requires leverage and management. Gold has 5,000 years of history as a store of value, but it doesn't compound, and its performance over recent decades has been inconsistent. Bitcoin has the hardest supply cap of any asset ever created. There is only 21 million coins, mathematically fixed, but it comes with volatility that most people are not genuinely prepared for until they live through a 50 or 70% drawdown. The point is not to tell you which one to choose. The point is that staying entirely in cash by default, by the feeling that it's the responsible thing, is itself a choice with real financial consequences, and it should be a conscious decision, not one you made because nobody told you there were other options. So, is saving money actually enough? No, not on its own, not anymore, and possibly not for a long time. Saving, as we said, is necessary. The emergency fund is real. The discipline of spending less than you earn is actually non negotiable. None of that changes. But saving as the end point, as the strategy itself, is a response to a world that no longer exists. A world where currencies held their value reliably enough that keeping money in a bank was not a slow loss. We are not living in that world right now, and we have not been for a while. What's enough looks like this: you save what you need to save, the buffer, the short term goals, the liquidity you need to function, and then you deploy the rest deliberately into assets that have a real structure argument for holding or growing their value over time. Not because someone on the internet told you to, not because of hype or fear of missing out, because you actually understand what inflation is, what it does, and what protects you from it. That understanding is what separates people who build real wealth over time from people who feel financially responsible their whole lives and arrive at retirement with less than they expected. The difference is rarely income, it's almost always what they did or did not do with the money they had. Saving is where financial responsibility starts. It's not where it ends. Now, I want you to do this this week. Find out the actual interest rate your savings account is paying you right now. Not what you think it is, what actually is. Then find out what the current inflation rate is in your country. Subtract one from the other. That number, positive or negative, is your real return on your savings, the real change in your purchasing power every year. Most people have never done that calculation. They see the number in their account go up and they feel fine. But that calculation is the truth. And you cannot make good decisions with money until you are willing to look at the truth of what your money is actually doing, not just what it feels like it's doing. If the number is negative, which for a lot of people it will be, that's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to ask the next question. What am I going to do differently? And what proportion of what I have should be in something that preserve value over time? You don't have to answer that today, but do the calculation first. Start there. Because the first step to escaping a trap is knowing you are in one. See you in the next one.